Chesham. This is my song recreation, Someday by The Strokes. The first thing to look at here is my drums. I've actually mapped the drums out myself, put them in as MIDI, separated all the drums onto their own channel. As we see here, we have a clap, kick, snare, hi-hat, a ride. The kick, the snare and the hi-hat have all got a bus on them where they're compressed, and then the hi-hat and the ride do not have that on them, and then the clap is actually side chained into the snare just to give it that slightly distorted crunch after the snare, as I'll demonstrate in a second. How I've done it is just using a slight little bit of distortion on it, and then as I say, side chaining it in through the EQ, and then I'll just demonstrate that now. So you hear the drums, without the clap, and then with that clap in there, just giving it that crunch afterwards, as we see quite a low fuddy kick, and then them bright hi-hats. All the drums I've actually used, except the clap, using a Studio Drummer, a great tool, inside Kontakt, really great drum sounds. And then I've just slightly altered the attack time of the kick just to give it a little bit less kind of fud, and then done the same with the snare, just taking off a little bit of attack so it's not quite as sharp, because the drums are actually quite low in the mix, and they're also quite washy in a way. They're not as tight as drums, like modern drums are. On the lead guitars, I've recorded straight into my interface, and then into Amplitude. And then what I've done with the guitars inside Amplitude is add a tube compressor on one channel here on channel 7, and then also graphic EQ'd it to really get that brightness of the tone. So let's just demonstrate. It's that lead guitar, that bright tone. And then we'll just listen to it without that graphic EQ and without that compressor. You can see the dramatic difference. To give it that bright, clean tone with that slight crunch. And then pretty much the same thing in the other lead channel, and with a slightly different compressor. Actually the Fender compressor, also a really nice compressor, and then once again another graphic EQ. On my rhythm guitars, once again I've used Amplitude, and once again I've double tracked the guitars, and inside Amplitude this time, now we're looking at the second rhythm track. Once again I've used the Fender compressor on this track, and then also a stereo enhancer, because the Strokes guitars are actually quite direct in the mix. Everything's quite prominent and really does have its place, so with this tool I was able to give them more of that direct feel. And then once again a graphic EQ, really to brighten them up and strengthen where they are once again in the mix. What I've also done to manipulate the sound of these channels is used a Jazz Comp amp, and then also the EQ on the channel is I've raised it just a little bit, about 1.5k, just to give it its presence there as well. And that is pretty much replicated on the other track as well. If we look inside Amplitude, you'll see a very similar thing going on here, this time with a tube compressor. So keeping one of the rhythms, one of the leads, consistent with that tube compressor, giving that really kind of slightly more crunchier tone. And then the graphic EQ, once again, making sure it's got the correct dynamic, so it really comes out through the mix. now we have a look at the bass. The bass was also recorded in. The bass is actually a very true sound, gone for a compressor, a little bit of EQ taken, so a little bit of that kind of mid-range taken out of the bass, and then just a little bit of spark, so it's really kind of controlling the low end to lows. So let's just have a little listen on that. So you can hear the really clear bass. And you can hear all the guitar parts have really got their own space, and that's something that's very prominent in the actual Strokes song. So that's something I've really tried to work hard on here to replicate. One of the biggest problems I had with the vocals was trying to get that crunchy sound that he does have on it, and also try and push the vocal away a little bit, because something you'll hear from the recording I've got is the voice sounds very close to the mic. One way I got the distortion on the vocal is by adding a little bit of distortion to it. But one of the biggest things I had to overcome with the vocals was I was adding this distortion and then trying to add that reverb, and it was just completely taking it away. So if you listen to the vocal,
many ways they'll miss the good old days someday,
you can hear that crunch, and then if you listen to it again with reverb, you can hear that disappear.
Many ways they'll miss the good old days someday, someday.
And the reverb just kept cleaning that vocal up, and that's not what I wanted. So in the end, there's no reverb on the vocals. Hence, they're very kind of in-your-face sound. And then as well, the vocals have had a slight trimming off cue as well at the high end. Not a great deal more done to them. I mean, on the bus you've got a compressor as well, and then they're automated as well. There's quite a lot of automation done. Just quickly show you that. So you can see all the automation, because the slightly inconsistent quality of the recording that was unfortunate.
Says I'm lacking in depth. I will do my best.